the lieutenant said, follow me, and led me across the parade grounds to this tent, and said, there's a switchboard, you're gonna operate that at 8 hours a day. Well, then as other battalions moved into the area, we got more and more people coming in, so then I made chief operator and had other operators for me, operating for me. So it turned out to be a bad deal and a good deal in the end. I know all about that.
Okay.
I know about that one.
There's
All
the
right,
switchboard.
there's a fuel switchboard, which they use out in the field, which means they're out in the battle zone. And it's hand cranked, because there was no electricity out there. And then there's the other switchboard that I worked on. Next one.
Yep.
Which is a commercial type of switchboard. As you can see, we have 3 operators working here for 9th Tactical Air Command. And you see how many telephone calls they're handling through that one thing. We worked in 3 shifts from 8 to 4, 4 to 12, 12 to 8. I did most of the people who are either on radio operators or teletype operators. Oops.
Didn't get too far. Okay.
Yeah. So I was assigned to the Air Force. We moved to Bradenton, Tent City, in a baseball training camp. I had a good time in Florida. I was making $30 a month, and the money was all mine, so I'd go out 8 hours and go into town. A friend of mine married a girl downtown there, and asked me to go on a double date with him and his wife. And after the movie, we went to his mother-in-law's, and we were sitting around talking away and having a few drinks, and all of a sudden I realized it's after 11, I'm supposed to be back at camp. He said, there's no problem, I'll stay with my mother-in-law, and we're renting a room in this house on the 2nd floor, and the key is under the mat, and you can use our room, and then go into camp in the morning. It was fine. So I went over to took a cab over to the house and knocked on the door, and woke up the landlord and said, I'm so-and-so's brother, you know, and then found the key under the mat, opened the door, lay down in bed, and went, I guess I had a few drinks, and I went to sleep, my uniform on. Had a good sleep, woke up in the morning, the birds were chirping, and the roosters crowing, and there was an open closet in the room. There was all, I'm looking around, and all I see is dresses and nurses' uniforms. I suddenly realized maybe I made a mistake, so I dashed out of the house and got back to camp. I saw my friend. I said, well, does someone else have a room up there? Oh, a nurse, she works at night. Well, I guess I made a little mistake. Anyway, for some reason, you skipped ahead.
Sure.
I'll tell them. For some reason, they shipped me out on July 1st to an overseas training camp. And after staying there for several months, I finally declared that because I had a bad left eye, I couldn't go overseas. I was declared unfit for overseas duties. So shipped down to South Carolina to join a signal company there. But they had left and they didn't know what to do with me. But all of a sudden they got me on a train shipped to Camp Hill in New Jersey. Why? I didn't know. I'll find out fairly soon enough. On September 26th, I was shipped to New Jersey and shipped out to England in October on the Queen Mary with some 10,000 soldiers on board. Terrible food and conditions, absolutely. You walked into the big fancy dining room and all it did was smell of disinfectant. I had 3 sausages and food, and we had 2 meals a day. I ended up buying sandwiches from the crew, and I started running out of money. You won't believe this, but I bought chocolate-covered marshmallow cookies and lived on those for 2 days. I never ate them again. Anyway, we landed in Scotland, and I was transported down to Reading to join a unit down there. So we lived in 6-man tents like this. I joined, and as you see, they had telephone, electric lines going there. Each one had one light bulb in there. And when they showed the movies, you either went to see the movie or you stayed in a dark tent because the generators couldn't handle both of them. My tent was down the furthest end there. And every morning you had to fall out for roll call. So one morning I decided if I stayed in bed and just yelled out my name, because it's complete darkness in the early morning, they wouldn't know whether I stood outside or not. And I tried that, and sure enough, it worked. Unfortunately, other people decided to imitate me, and the sergeant decided to walk down the whole line and see who was missing, including me. So I was kept from going out for a couple of days. So I was assigned to this D Company in 926. D Company was one of the last companies formed, and they provided repeater stations, which increased if you had talking on a telephone for a long distance, the voice gets weaker. So what they did was they go to a repeater station, that increases the volume of the voice, and they go further. So we're based near Reading and Basingstoke, and I became chief operator of the switchboard again, I guess because of my previous knowledge. And I spent 2 weeks in London and learned how to operate those big switchboards. That was a lot of fun. 1 week in a regular telephone training center with about 15 girls on each side of this. And then another week working for the Ministry of Supply in there, answering telephones for the Ministry of Supply. Well, I also went to see plays in London, which, by the way, one of the notices they had on the bill was that in case of an air raid, said the show will continue. If you want to leave, you can. We did have air raids when I was there, and everything was blacked out. We walked around with flashlights. I had to slit on to let the light out, and the blackout was everywhere. Every entrance to a bar, to a theater, or anything else was all blacked out, so the light would escape. We participated in invasion training by going out on a landing barge and driving off the landing barge onto the beach. Unfortunately, they didn't check to see how deep the water was the first time it went off, and the Jeep drove off when the water was all the way up to the top of the hood. So then the British sailor went out there with his stick and said, "Oh, too deep." So they moved it to another spot where we were able to go. We had our first casualties, believe it or not, on June 15th. The invasion on June 6th, our colonel and other people had already gone to Normandy. Somebody had brought back a practice grenade, and his men would examine it, and I said to them, "Be careful, it might be live." I didn't go more than 10 feet away from when it exploded, and sure enough, 3 men were wounded from that grenade. Okay. These are the guns that were issued to us. The infantry got the larger rifle, of course, and they got the machine gun. We got these small carbines that we carried with us. Here we are with mail call. Everybody waited for mail come. What they did was you wrote up the letter on the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. They microfilmed them and then shipped them over with microfilm over to Europe. And then for Europe, they copied them onto a small letter size thing about that big. And that's how they handled the mail from 3 million soldiers. But the guy without the hat on was me. So on June 6th, we invaded the beaches of Normandy, and the movie See Private Ryan is a very realistic dramatic. And in the end, you'll see how our 9th Air Force saved the infantrymen by having 2 P-51s come over and shoot up the tanks. But our first elements landed on the beach in the afternoon to set up facilities, and the engineers started preparing the landing strip for our airplanes already in the afternoon of D-Day. The 9th Tax Air assignment was to provide air support for the 1st U.S. Army, and our 926 provided communication for 9th TAC headquarters. These are the P-47s that were used to support the infantry, manufactured on Long Island, by the way. and commanded by this fairly young general, General Consultant. His first name was Elwood. I showed him at the Pete when he went to school. Okay, so not until the 24th will I shift over there. They needed a sergeant in charge of a shift. The sergeant is in charge of 12 men. This is only 2 people that I have to take care of. I was assigned to A company, which meant that I was on detached service. I didn't have to do any other duties because I was not with my company. And I provided telephone operator support in my attack. We camped near this Pointe des Hocs. Pointe des Hocs were cliffs 100 feet high, which on D-Day the Rangers scaled with ladders and ropes and to knock out some artillery that was aimed toward Omaha Beach. The German Air Force came over every night, primarily to bomb the supply areas. Though they did land a bomb next to us, the field next to us, and killed a cow. Sometimes they came over in the day, and I tried shooting them down one day. We controlled the air in the day, so they rarely came over in the daytime. On July 2nd, we moved to a location which was some 4 miles from the front line with the 4th Division artillery and tank firing. And then at night, they had the aircraft firing. So it was never a quiet place to rest. After you came off the midnight shift to try and go to sleep in the morning. But we survived. Not only survived, I told my wife and my daughter when it was raining like crazy here, I said, that reminds me of July in Normandy. It rained almost every other day. Well, I'll show you our living quarters. These are our living quarters. We had these 2-man tents, and the meals were these K rations that came in a little box like that. You had 1 can of food, you had some crackers, you had powder to make some lemonade, and 3 cigarettes. And then, of course, toilet facilities were camp type, and the water came in a large bag full of chlorine, which tasted awful. We used the helmet as a wash basin, and you can see here's my wash line here. My worldly possessions are all in this one bag right here. That's where all the clothes were. And the backpack was out here. The canteen for food is right there. This is where we operated from. There's a position board in back of a military van. There's 3 position switchboard right there. This is where all the telephone lines come in, and the test equipment is on this table. And the man called who maintains all this was sitting out there. He's the wire chief. And there I am working away on the switchboard with my friend Eric, and probably somebody else there. We have 38,000 calls a month. The 2 things that helped win us the war and helped the infantry and the tanks were the field artillery and our fighter bombers. Once we got off the beach, we ran into hedgerows. It was filled with many small fields with earthen bank topped with trees and bushes. Each one was a separate battlefield. So in 8 weeks, we were only going in 20 miles. So this General Bradley, in charge of 1st Army, planned this operation where we bombed the German lines, and with this street road being the demarcation between us and them. This will give you an idea what the hedgerows are like. These infantrymen are trying to figure out who's on the other side. So on July 25th, they light and heavy bombers during the German lines. During the bombing, I handled this critical phone call. What happened was that after later on in the day, after the first group bombed the lines, the smoke drifted over to our lines, and the planes were bombing our people. So General Bradley called up General Quesada, which is the phone call I had, and told him to get the planes away from there, since Quesada controlled the airplanes, which he did. So a few people were killed by that. But the result was we finally broke out of Normandy. With the British, we liberated France, Belgium, and part of Holland. we camped out at these different places and then ended up in the gardens of Versailles. We toured Paris, we were greeted as liberators, but the situation reports on June 6th and March 31st, we had 216,000 casualties. These are some of the sights I saw in Versailles. A palace and a friend. But I also had these three young men who came to us and befriended us, bringing us fresh fruit and wine, and we gave them K rations to take home with them. I was in touch with Jacques here by mail in the 1970s for a short while, and he passed away. I'm wearing a British Army jacket I bought from the British soldier when I was had service on an air base that had British soldiers on it, because I didn't like this Eisenhower jacket. I thought this was more classy. So, totally out of uniform, of course. Anyway, we moved from France to Belgium and to the city of Verviers later. And then we set up the switchboard and headquarters in the city hall. And, but meanwhile, while we were living in a school building in Verviers and enjoying the town, the soldiers were getting killed at the Siegfried Line. Because the first place we were running out of ammunition and food, because we didn't have a port. The nearest port was Cherbourg, so everything had to be transported by truck all the way to the Belgian line. And then all of a sudden, on December 17th, the Germans had built up a large reserve in the Ardennes, and they counterattacked outnumbered 3-1. Because the Germans advanced toward Verviers, they forced us to move to Liège. This is the extent of their invasion. They were stopped at these points here. Now, Verviers is right here. You can see here's a bulge where the Third Army stopped. And we moved to Liège here. The only problem with Liège was, and I'll show you next, was they had buzz bombs coming over. 2,000 pounds of explosion. They started on June 13, they ran in London and Antwerp, Verviers, and Liège. Liège, they came over almost in 15 minutes and killed hundreds of civilians and soldiers. It didn't end until February 1st, when we finally got into Germany. So this, they would go puck, 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 and then stop. And then you wait to hear the explosion. Never knew where it was going to land. But on the morning of December 28th, I heard this large whistling sound, and next thing I knew, the whole place blew apart. The bomb landed on our front wing, and we were over here on this floor here. All the windows blew out, we were all cut by the flying glass. I was next to the wall, and a blackboard fell on top of me, and then because it was a stud wall, they had brick infill, and all the bricks fell on top of the blackboard, pinning me down into the bed. Fortunately, the blackboard was there. So we had 17 seriously hurt that were in the front, and we had 56 people wounded by flying glass and in the swing here as well. These are the infantrymen. You see the conditions they were faced. 1 million men combined. Half a million Germans, half a million Americans, in one of the coldest winters. The sad thing about this photograph is that 2 minutes after the photographer took this photograph, he was killed. Meanwhile, our airplanes were able to get up in the air once the clouds cleared, and we really decimated the German transports. And not only German transports, I read the other day that we shot down 700 German aircraft. And I mean, they had 700 less pilots to pilot their aircraft. It's one of the reasons we were able to advance into Germany as well as we did. So after we drove the Germans back, we started the defense on February 6th. March 7th, we captured the city of Cologne. Then fortunately, on March 8th, the First Army captured a bridge over the Rhine, and we crossed the Rhine. By April 1st, we had circled the Ruhr, and 140,000 German troops just had to surrender. By April 23rd, we reached the Elbe River, which is the dividing line between us and the Russians. We met the Russians on the 25th. Hitler committed suicide on the 30th, and this was the last day our fighter planes flew a mission. We entered Germany on March 19th, and we entered Germany at Aachen, and this is the condition of many of the German cities of the time as a result of all the bombing and artillery. We stayed in this city of Buell, and we took over the telephone building. I got an interesting story on that too. They had the main telephone building had this one vault. All these long distance cables came into the vault. And since our telephone people were concerned that somebody might sabotage all the cables, they locked me up one night inside this concrete enclosure with a machine gun and said, if anybody comes through the door, you shoot them. So I stayed awake all night long with a machine gun in my hands, you know. And when they knocked on the door, they made sure that they identified themselves. So oh yeah, just to give you an idea, these are all telephone lines coming into our switchboard. We also had the first dial system. Our Bell Telephone men who were in the organization went to Brussels and had a telephone, automatic telephone system developed in one of our vans. So now we had fewer phone calls from person to person within headquarters. Across the Rhine on a pontoon bridge, you can see how wide the Rhine is. These are nothing more than a bunch of boats with these metal tracks on top of it. And April and May were the final battles and liberation of death camp slaves. On April 26th, we moved to Weimar, the home of Buchenwald concentration camp. We toured the camp and made us really realize why we're there. It's for liberation of civilians and the slaves of the Nazis. And I found out when I went back in 2005, it was also for the liberation of the German people as well. May 7th, the war ended. We had 3 million soldiers in Europe, 118,802 were killed. And though we were not a combat unit, we had 12 men killed and 61 wounded. These pictures, an old picture showing the Jews being marched off the concentration camps. And that's the entrance to the Buchenwald camp, which is only a one-way entrance. These are the ovens where they burnt the bodies. And I went on a tour, and we saw this is the last thing we saw with the cremation ovens. Then I walked outside, and what did I see? Oh, before that, when I first walked in there, these boys were wanted a photograph taken. They were also in Buchenwald. That's an army photograph showing the men in the beds. He became famous with his book. This man I met in 2005 when I went for the celebration liberation of Buchenwald. He came to the celebration. But the same, I walked outside and this is what I saw. The bodies were still stacked there. The worst part was they were still loading them on trucks, on the back, flatbed truck. I just tossed them on it. This is another concentration camp. It was even had worse conditions. They reported that they murdered 12 million people and they were liberated 200,000, 300,000 people. 21,000 soldiers, 505 soldiers were killed in war on all sides of the war. The Russians moved in on June 16th, so we had to move out of Weimar, move to our air base in Fritzlau. We drove through Cassel, it looked like that. They were totally destroyed, as many German cities were. Oh, yes. I forgot, we traveled in comfort on boxcars. We had nice straw beds like this there, and of course, when the doors are closed, they had little vents on top to let a little air in there, so it was very comfortable. All the way down to Marseille. Anyway, I was one before that. Yeah. Even though I had 5 battle stars, I was able to, had enough battle stars to get shipped home, like so many other my people in my unit, except I was deemed essential. So I was transferred to the 927th Signal Battalion, who was scheduled to go to the Philippines to support the invasion of Japan, me included. Fortunately, the Japanese surrendered in August because we actually expected to have 1 million casualties just for the battle of Japan. So I'm here instead of being somewhere else. So I got shipped down to Provence, Marseille, on October 18th, sailed from Marseille on a small cargo ship, arrived in New York City on the 28th, and was discharged on November 2nd. You can see the slight bed arrangement, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beds, all stacked up in the hold of the ship. And when the ship was bouncing out of the water on rough seas, they closed the hatches, so it was like an oven in there. But I had the top bunk, so I was fortunate. So, women in World War II. In other countries, the women would go out of their workforce. Some worked in the factories, others served as military nurses, or Women's Army Corps. Movie stars came to entertain the troops, and all the households always had to put up with food and clothing rations. The Red Cross was a great help. Not only did they come around and serve dinners and coffee, but they assisted the soldiers with housing. When we went on leave, the Red Cross had places for us to sleep in the cities. And if you needed money, they'd loan you money. If there was an emergency at home, they would take care of it. They would notify you that there was an emergency at home. These ladies actually flew these bombers from the factories to the airfields. We stopped in Normandy on my visit, and this is about the cemetery in Normandy, France. But that's not the only one. There's quite a few cemeteries. I also saw the one in Italy that they had there. So, they're all there. So what I do after the war, I went to drafting school, worked as an architectural draftsman. And after years of home study, I took the state exam and registered architect, designing schools, hospitals, libraries, and everything. I married my wife, Mary O'Brien, with the help. We have 6 children who are now successful in their careers. I worked for Cornell and then wrote this book about my daily routine in the Army. Here's a few of my buildings. This is the interior of the church I designed. That's a elementary school, hockey ice arena, another elementary school, a very large one, with a courtyard in the middle, and a psychiatric hospital, which is this is 200 feet square, 4 county police buildings, and a high school. That's it.
Questions for Mr. DeGraffenio?
I was just wondering if you were drafted.
I'll have to see if my butler hearing aid works properly. What was the question?
I was wondering if you got drafted when you went into the military. Did you get drafted?
No, I enlisted. I enlisted before I was 20, so I could pick out the branch of service. But 3 months later, they changed the rules and they drafted everybody who was 18. So I got in time. I forgot to mention one more award. It's this, over here. This other little ribbon I have here. It's the French Croix de Guerre as well. Wait a minute, French government.
What was your family life like at home before you went to the war?
What was your family life like?
What was what?
What was your family life like before you went?
What was the life before I left? It was very good in the 1920s. My father apparently was earning good money in the 1920s as a laborer. He went back, he came over in 18, worked as a laborer in the United States, served in the U.S. Army. Came out of the Army and got to be an American citizen because of his service. And then in 1921, he got a passport, went back to Italy, and found himself a wife. Brought my mother back from Italy and set up residence in Huntington Station, Long Island. 2 years later, he built a 3-room house. And 3 years later, he built a standard bungalow house with a two-bedroom living room, kitchen, and bathroom, and electricity, and water, and public water, and everything else, which we lived in that whole time. All of a sudden, come 1929, the stock market crashed, and all of a sudden, work got scarce. They had a savings account that they started off with, which actually had some $250, which was a lot of money in those days. And by 1935, they're down to 49 cents. So they had no money left. They were behind in the taxes and their payments to the bank. President Roosevelt was on the radio announcing this new program called the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which the government would subsidize your loans and pay them off, and you could pay the government back the monthly payments, which is what she did. And so every month we sent them a check for $29 until 1945. I said because there was no work was intermittent, my father worked on whatever jobs he could get. Besides being in construction, he worked shoveling coal in a supply place. He worked digging ditches, whatever he could do. As I said, I went to work when I was 14, picking string beans. We would go to, as I said, we'd go out to the fields and pick up the potatoes that the farmer left behind. And it was amazing. There used to be a crowd of people out there doing the same thing. Because of the Homeowners Loan Association, we were able to keep the house and be able to live in it. Other people could not pay, had all their possessions put out on the sidewalk and thrown out of the houses. Many farmers up there lost their farms because they couldn't pay. So it was really bad times. In fact, I brought the teacher another book, which will tell them all about my experiences during the Depression days. And, so, working in the grocery store, stocking shelves there in the grocery store, and then moving up into the dairy and helping out the dairy manager. And finally, when he got drafted, I got promoted to dairy manager. I was making $25 a week, which was a lot of money for that time. But we worked 60 hours a week in the grocery store. We stayed open 10 o'clock at night, Fridays and Saturdays, and the rest of the time was from 9 to 8.
When did you meet your wife?
I beg your pardon?
When did you meet your wife?
When did I what?
Meet your wife?
When did I meet my wife?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. She was in high school with me. We took one. Actually, she moved to Huntington in her junior year. And we were one class in high school, so I knew her from high school. We were in a speech arts class, which taught us how to speak to the public. So she made a presentation, I made a presentation. Then she went to work with my sister in Metropolitan Life Insurance during the war. And my sister wrote to me sometime in July saying, oh, I'm working for MetLife, and there's a girl here who went to school with you called Mary O'Brien. Came out of the Army in November, and in December I'm taking my sister to the movies. and Mary and her mother are coming out of the movies, and she just really Mary said, I remember my brother, and she said, yes, I remember. Hi, all friends. Anyway, I had a girlfriend in Brooklyn, and I took the train to Brooklyn to see her a couple of times. Only girlfriend. We met in Times Square, by the way. So she complained because I would come and see her often enough. I said, well, I'm doing this work. This girl has, from the letters she wrote me, she doesn't have too much intelligence. And I can't keep commuting to Brooklyn to see this girl. So, in fact, the one night I missed a train back home, I had to stay overnight in Jamaica. So anyway, somehow or another I remembered Mary O'Brien. Oh no, she's, I think now in retrospect that she's gone, I think she was very, very Cajun. On December 28th, she invited my sister to come over and see her Christmas tree. Now, she lived on a 12-acre estate. Her father was a chauffeur for this wealthy woman in the middle of the woods. So my mother said, I can't have Camilla drive there by herself in the dark. Why don't you go with her? So I met Mary O'Brien and her family. So I dated some other girls. And I wasn't too happy with any of them, but then I remembered Mary O'Brien, called her up for a date. And sure enough, we met down in the village theater to the movies. And then after that, we stopped in the hotel next door and both had one drink together and talked. And because we didn't have a car, and the way we got together was that our father drove her to the Huntington Village, and I took the bus down to Huntington Village. We met at the theater. And because we didn't have a car, we had to walk home. So I walked the 2+ miles to her house, walking away, and the other 1.25 miles to my house. And we did that quite often. We'd meet down the movies and then walk home together. So in a way, we really got to know each other. Just this long distance walk. Finally, in the wintertime, I got a cab that would take us home, and I did that. Anyway, so in February, I decided to go to school. I tried to go to college, but I took business courses in high school, so therefore college wouldn't accept me. So I went to drafting school. When I graduated from drafting school, I got my first job. I was making $35 a week, and I asked Mary to marry me. Now I had money coming.
Folks, let's thank Mr. Giacomo. The bell's going to ring. It's going to be 1 second. It'll take 2 seconds to pass this out. If they're grade reports, just so you know, the 5-week came pretty quickly, as you probably realize. That means there's not a lot of grades in here, which means if you're